On agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the journal, which this chair will put de novo. The question is on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the journal. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. Journal stands approved.
Mr. Speaker, I request a recorded vote.
A recorded vote is requested. Those favoring a recorded vote will rise. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote.
The House wrapping up their work with a vote on the journal, the record of the previous day's activities, and that'll do it legislatively for the House. They just passed a bill that would bar individuals from prevent the administration from providing subsidies to people who want to buy insurance under the health care law until the Health and Human Services Department confirms a plan to verify income. And by some accounts, that's the 41st attempt to delay or defund or repeal Obamacare, as it's called. The Senate's not expected to take up the measure, and the other day the White House issued a veto threat. That'll do it for legislative work, but we expect to hear from the leaders in the House. Nancy Pelosi and the Speaker John Boehner were covering their briefings a bit later on, and leadership of the House and Senate has been meeting in Speaker Boehner's office. We may hear some of the outcome of that as they discuss the potential for a continuing resolution coming to the House floor next week, and also the debate and discussion on the debt ceiling as well.
agree, the nays are 157 with 1 answering present. Correction, the nays are 147 with 1 answering present. The journal stands approved. What purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that I may hereafter be considered to be the first sponsor of H.R. 1001, a bill originally introduced by Representative Bonner of Alabama for the purpose of adding co-sponsors and requesting reprinting pursuant to Clause 7 of Rule 2, Rule 12.
Without objection, so ordered.
The Chair lays before the House the following enrolled bills.
Senate 304, an act to direct the Secretary of the Interior to convey to the state of Mississippi 2 parcels of surplus land within the boundary of the Natchez Trace Parkway and for other purposes.
Can we have order in the House? Please take your conversations off the floor. For what purpose does the gentleman from Maryland seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks and take 1 minute for the purposes of inquiring of the Majority Leader the schedule for the week to come.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
I thank the Speaker, and I yield to the Majority Leader, Mr. Camden.
I thank the gentleman from Maryland, the Democratic whip, for yielding. Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, on Monday the House will meet in pro forma session at 2 p.m. and no votes are expected. On Tuesday, the House will meet at noon for morning hour and 2 p.m. for legislative business. Votes will be postponed until 6:30 p.m. On Wednesday and Thursday, the House will meet at 10 a.m. for morning hour and noon for legislative business. On Friday, the House will meet at 9 a.m. for legislative business. Last votes of the week are expected no later than 3 p.m. Madam Speaker, members are advised that pending ongoing discussions on the continuing resolution, the House may need to be in session during the week of September 23rd and possibly into the weekend. Members should expect an announcement next week regarding when the House would meet during the week of September 23rd. This is a change from the previously announced schedule. Madam Speaker, next week the House will consider a few bills under suspension of the rules, a complete list of which will be announced by the close of business tomorrow. The House will likely consider H.R. 1526, the Restoring Healthy Forests for Healthy Communities Act, sponsored by the Chairman of the National
Madam Speaker, the House is not in order.
Gentlemen, please take your conversations off the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I continue to yield to my friend, the Majority Leader.
I thank the gentleman. The House will, again, Madam Speaker, the House will likely consider H.R. 1526, the Restoring Healthy Forests for Healthy Communities Act, sponsored by the Chairman of the Natural Resources Committee, Representative Doc Hastings. In addition to improving forest health and helping prevent catastrophic wildfires, this legislation contains a short-term extension of the Secure Rural Schools program. In addition, Madam Speaker, I expect the House to consider H.R. 761, the National Strategic and Critical Minerals Production Act of 2013, authored by Representative Mark Amodei, and H.R. 687, the Southeast Arizona Land Exchange and Conservation Act of 2013, drafted by Representative Paul Gosar. These bills, both from the Natural Resources Committee, will foster economic growth and create jobs for the middle class. Madam Speaker, the House will also consider the Nutrition Reform and Work Opportunity Act, authored by Agriculture Chairman Representative Frank Lucas. This legislation restores the intent of the bipartisan welfare reforms adopted in 1996 to the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program. It also refocuses the program on those who need it most. No law-abiding beneficiary who meets the income and asset tests of the current program and is willing to comply with the applicable work requirements will lose their benefits under the bill. Finally, Madam Speaker, members should be prepared to vote on the continuing resolution as the new fiscal year approaches. I thank the gentleman and I yield back.
I thank the gentleman for that information. I would reiterate to members, in case they weren't listening, the Majority Leader has said that we ought to be clearing our calendars for the week of the 23rd of September. That's the last week of the month. Originally, we were scheduled to be off that week, but in light of the fact that we have been unable yet to pass a continuing resolution or appropriation bills to fund the government's activities after the end of the fiscal year on September 30th, I'm pleased to see the Majority Leader is putting the House on notice. I've been telling my members for the last 2 months to reserve that time in the contingency of which the Majority Leader speaks. Mr. Majority Leader, before we left in July, we had a bill on the floor to fund transportation and the Housing and Urban Development Department, as well as other items. That bill was pulled. Subsequent to that bill being pulled, Hal Rogers, the chairman of the Appropriations Committee, sent a notice out to a lot of people. I presume the gentleman had an opportunity to read it. It said, and I quote, "I am extremely disappointed with the decision to pull the THUD bill, as it's referred to, from the House calendar today. The prospects for passing this bill in September are bleak at best, given the vote count on passage that was apparent this afternoon." He then made this statement, Mr. Leader: "With this action, the House has declined to proceed on the implementation of the very budget it adopted 3 months ago. Thus, I, Hal Rogers speaking, believe that the House has made its choice. Sequestration and its unrealistic and ill-conceived discretionary cuts must be brought to an end." Mr. Leader, as you know, he went on to say this: "The House, Senate, and White House must come together as soon as possible on a comprehensive compromise that repeals sequestration, takes the nation off this lurching path from fiscal crisis to fiscal crisis, reduces our deficits and debt, and provides a realistic top-line discretionary spending level to fund the government in a responsible and attainable way." That was the chairman from Kentucky, conservative Republican, his statement on July 31st, 2013. I want to tell my friend, the Majority Leader, that I agree with Mr. Rogers. The sequester level is unattainable and unrealistic. That's the chairman of your Appropriations Committee, who is responsible, and has been for many years, for judging what are the appropriate expenditures for our government to maintain programs important to our country, to our economy, and to our national security. Mr. Leader, we have another issue beyond the continuing resolution, which will also, as the gentleman knows, have a very substantial effect on the fiscal credibility of America, on the fiscal stability of America, and the growth of our economy and the confidence of our people and of people around the world, and that is the extension of our debt limit. This is going to be a shorter colloquy than we usually have, because the issues that confront us are so very, very important. I want to tell the Majority Leader that we've not had any discussions about a possible compromise, nor have I had any discussions with Mr. McCarthy about a possible compromise, nor have I or the Leader had any substantive conversations with the Speaker about a substantive compromise, in our view, consistent with what your chairman of the Appropriations Committee, rightfully in my view, observed are the fiscal realities confronting our country. You have said, Mr. Boehner has said, I believe, Ms. Pelosi believes, that not extending the debt limit is unthinkable, and if we failed to do so, would have very, very serious adverse consequences on our country. So rather than discuss other further scheduling issues, except to the extent that the gentleman wants to respond, let me say to the gentleman that in these two items in particular, I stand ready to work with your side. My side stands ready to work with your side on a compromise. But I will tell the gentleman with all sincerity, we will not pursue what Mr. Rogers correctly observes is an unsustainable and damaging process. And to that extent, we will not compromise on that issue because your chairman is correct. It's harmful to our country. So in that context, Mr. Leader, I'm hopeful that as we move forward, as you've just been required to have another week added to the calendar because we've been unable so far to do our work. And this week, of course, one of 2 weeks that we were supposed to meet in September, we haven't done much. That's unfortunate. So we have used 50% of the time that we had for not much. So I would ask the gentleman if he thinks that there is a possibility to compromise. I've observed, the world has observed, the difficulty the gentleman and Mr. Boehner, the Speaker, are having getting agreement in your own party. But we need to get agreement between the two parties, between the two parties and the Senate and the President of the United States, so that this country can be funded and can meet its obligations and stabilize our economy. And I yield to my friend.
I thank the gentleman, Madam Speaker, and first I would say I'm glad he received the news that we may very well be in session the last week of September the way he has, because I do think it reflects the seriousness with which both sides take the pending fiscal issues and deadlines that we are about to confront, both in the continuing resolution as well as the debt ceiling itself. Now, Madam Speaker, I've set aside the statement that my friend, the Democratic whip, has indicated about not doing anything this week because we just voted on a bipartisan bill enforcing accountability on Obamacare. You know, as the Democratic whip knows, Obamacare is growingly unpopular in this country. In fact, the latest public poll out today, nearly 60% of Americans reject Obamacare as the direction in health care. And we are serious and committed on this side of the aisle for a better future for health care. The President himself had said that it's not ready for prime time and has issued waivers for businesses, for insurance companies. We need to have a waiver and delay for all people of Obamacare. The law that the bill that we passed today says that Obamacare right now is hoping, the administration is hoping that all the income subsidies that are still in effect will go forward in a transparent and accountable way. That's really impossible to guard against fraud, given that the administration has already exempted corporate America and the businesses from having to comply with the verification of someone's eligibility for subsidies. So there's no way that this law can work. And our side is committed to discussing how we go forward, which is first and foremost a delay of Obamacare. And I'd say to the gentleman, I'm glad that he's willing to sit down and talk. And I would hope that he could impose upon the administration, because as late as August 27, 2013, Treasury Secretary Jack Lew says, quote, "The President has made it clear we are not going to negotiate over the debt limit." Well, I would say, Madam Speaker, history has shown us that in periods of divided government, there's always been discussions around the fiscal issues of this country. And in fact, the issue of the debt ceiling has provided a forum for resolution on some of those fiscal issues. Going back to Graham-Rudman-Hollings, that was negotiated and settled around a debt ceiling discussion, as was the Congressional Review Act, as was, Madam Speaker, as we know 2 years ago, the Budget Control Act. So I hope that the gentleman could take his dedication to trying to work things out to the White House and say it's time for all of us to sit down and resolve these issues. Now, as far as the sequester is concerned, I would say to the gentleman he knows. I don't think that the sequester is the right way and the best way to go about reducing spending. I mean, just by its very nature, a blunt across-the-board cut treats programs that you may want to get rid of in the same way that it treats programs that perhaps are really doing a great job. That indiscriminate type of cut is something that we could really do better. We could do a lot better than doing those kinds of cuts, which is exactly our point. We need to sit down and discuss with this administration how we're going to affect the reforms that we need on the entitlement side, affect the delay of Obamacare. That's what we've got to do, Madam Speaker, and I yield back.
Madam Speaker, the problem has again been expressed. We have a single focus of the majority party, Madam Speaker, on defunding the Affordable Care Act. So many Republicans have said it is an unreasonable and irrational expectation to expect after an election has occurred, in which that was one of the principal issues in the election, for the President, or frankly the Senate, to agree to the objectives of the Republican Party that lost in America on this issue. There was a poll taken, November 2012. The President of the United States won that poll. But your myopic focus on that one issue threatens to shut down government and put at risk the creditworthiness of the United States of America. That is not what the American people expect. And unless the gentleman wants to respond, I will yield back the balance of my time. I yield back the balance of my time.
The chair would remind members to direct their remarks to the chair. Thank you.
Madam Speaker, I believe I was directing my remarks to the chair. Thank you.
The chair will now entertain requests for 1-minute speeches.
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that when the House adjourns today, it adjourn to meet at 2 p.m. on Monday next, and that the order of the House of January 3, 2013 regarding morning hour debate not apply on that day.
Without objection, so ordered. For what purpose does the gentleman from Indiana rise?
Madam Speaker, I ask permission to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to recognize a truly exceptional Hoosier company and a great friend in Langham Logistics and its president, Kathy Langham. Today, Langham Logistics will be celebrating their 25th anniversary. Langham Logistics was founded by two sisters, Kathy and Margaret Langham, who took the risk of starting a transportation business. Kathy and Margaret literally built Langham from the ground up, starting in a small office space and now operating a 300,000 square foot state-of-the-art warehouse that operates and advises supply chains from the smallest of companies to multi-billion-dollar corporations throughout the world. Their story is not unlike so many people in this country who dared to dream and then succeeded beyond and even their own wildest dreams. Their customers aren't the only ones who have noticed their hard work. In 2003, then-President George W. Bush visited Langham Logistics to highlight them as a model startup business that succeeded and was continuing to expand at an amazing rate. It was at that event that I first met Kathy Langham. Not only has Kathy and her family built this amazing operation, but they did it the right way, through hard work, and they gave back and continue to give back every chance they can. I could list all the numerous charities and causes that Kathy, her team, and her family contribute to, but that will go well beyond the 1 minute. Madam Speaker, that I asked for. So I would simply say on behalf of Hoosiers, I say congratulations to Kathy and Langham Logistics, and may you have another 25 years like the last 25. And with that, Madam Speaker, I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Connecticut seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I rise to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this week is National Suicide Prevention Week. More than 38,000 Americans die by suicide every year, 90% of whom have at least one treatable mental illness. Veterans account for 20% of suicides in this country, and military suicide is at an all-time high. The July 2012 cover of Time magazine described the tragedy of military suicide with a simple headline: one a day. 1 year later, these rates have remained largely unchanged, and we owe far better to those who have worn or do wear the uniform. Earlier this summer, I added an amendment to defense appropriations to add $10 million for military suicide awareness and prevention. It is our responsibility to care for our troops and for our veterans, and more work needs to be done. During National Suicide Prevention Week, I let us commit to ensuring that every American has access to treatment. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I request permission to address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks by unanimous consent.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. America has a lot of clean-burning natural gas. The Eagle Ford Shale in the district I represented created 400,000 jobs and roughly $2.6 billion in salaries and benefits in a 13-county area. Similar booms are happening in other parts of the country, like North Dakota and Pennsylvania. Our domestic energy creates widespread economic prosperity, and it will continue if we don't ruin it with overregulation and red tape. Exporting some of America's huge supply of natural gas will create tens of thousands more jobs, narrow our trade deficit by billions, and help both our allies in need like Japan and help the environment. And when you factor in transportation costs, gas here at home will always be cheaper. The DOE recently conditionally approved additional LNG export licenses, but there's still a lot of red tape to wade through before these properties open. I worry these contingent licenses artificially overstate the potential for future LNG exports, and the length of time these approvals take risk our competitive economic advantage over Middle Eastern country. I, along with 3 of my colleagues, Jim Costa, Joe Barton, and Philemon Vela, have created the LNG Export Caucus to help the development and timely export of LNG, encourage a rational regulatory environment that ensures production and export of LNG, creating jobs, helping the economy, and cleaning the environment. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Illinois seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I seek unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute, please.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today to talk about the most pressing issues facing my region of Illinois, and that's creating good-paying jobs and growing the economy. That's why last month I launched Partnering for Illinois' Economic Future. The goal of this initiative is to bring together regional leaders from across economic sectors, from business, educational institutions, and community organizations. We gathered to discuss ways to increase collaboration, to create jobs, and bolster the region's economy and manufacturing sectors. We held regional meetings in Rockford and Peoria and the Quad Cities in conjunction with the University of Illinois. And we will be holding a district-wide economic summit later this fall. But before we do this, I want to hear directly from the hardworking people of my region to get their thoughts on how best to create economic opportunity for all. The insight and input from my constituents, combined with the information we collected from the regional meetings, will help us develop solutions that will benefit all of our communities. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, the United States is considering sending missiles into Syria. Also, CIA-funded weapons have begun flowing to Syrian rebels. The rebels are made up of the Free Syrian Army, Al-Qaeda, and others. It seems the Free Syrian Army is liberating areas, and Al-Qaeda comes in behind and imposes strict Islamic Sharia law in those territories. Al-Qaeda is a terrorist group that is at war with the United States. Richard Engel with NBC interviewed Abu Abdab Rahman, one of the thousands of al-Qaeda fighters in Syria. In the interview, Engel asked Rahman this question: the United States is considering launching military strikes against Syria. Would that help you? Rahman replied, "We have a prayer. Allah, please annihilate our enemies by other enemies. Assad is an enemy and America is an enemy. Let them fight." Madam Speaker, in this civil war, why would we ever consider getting involved by launching missiles into Syria or arming the rebels, which include our enemy, al-Qaeda? And that's just the way it is. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to honor Miss Eileen Washington from my hometown of Fort Worth, Texas. She is a recent recipient of the President's Award for Service for her dedication and service to Tarrant County senior adults. Miss Washington has devoted her life to caring for her community, especially the elderly. She began her tenure at Senior Citizen Services in 1973 and shortly thereafter became the Director of Fellowship Center at Corner Senior Center on the south side of Fort Worth on New York Avenue. Here she has provided care for families through multiple generations, ensuring that they are able to age in place with health and dignity through the activities and friendships offered at Fellowship Corner Senior Center. Here she empowers older adults to find new friends, improve their health with nutrition and exercise, and contribute back through volunteer service. Most notably, Ms. Washington founded a dance group known as the Steppin' Grannies, which performs around the DFW Metroplex, giving seniors an opportunity to have fun while staying active. For over 40 years, Ms. Washington has encouraged older adults throughout Tarrant County to live with purpose and independence. Next week, she will be given the award at the annual Senior Spirit Awards given by the Senior Citizen Services of Tarrant County. Madam Speaker, again, I would like to congratulate Ms. Eileen Washington and commend her for her dedication to Tarrant County seniors.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Colorado seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, to address the House for 1 minute to revise and extend my remarks. I ask unanimous consent.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, according to the Wall Street Journal, without the legislation just passed by this chamber, fraudulent subsidy payments under the Affordable Care Act could account for $250 billion over the next decade. For this reason, I'm proud to have voted in support of H.R. 2775, the No Subsidies Without Verification Act. The White House has come out in strong opposition to this proposal, citing the fact that a program to verify eligibility already exists. I wonder, though, if a plan already exists, why the strong opposition to this proposal? And in the broader context, why the strong opposition to any proposal that seeks to create accountability with respect to federal spending? Across the nation, millions of families sit in their kitchen tables in order to figure out their limited finances and to make difficult decisions. Ensuring that their hard-earned dollars are being stretched to maximum effect. The federal government, however, shies away from any opportunity to ensure the same accountability. Madam Speaker, Americans are tired of seeing their hard-earned tax dollars wasted through fraud. I hope to see this common-sense legislation signed into law. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Texas seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. It gives me a great opportunity to rise today to salute and praise Dr. Thomas F. Freeman, educator, scholar, and legendary coach and teacher of the art of debate at the historic Texas Southern University, supporting the historic Texas Southern University debate team. For those of you who have not heard of that team, I ask you to look closely at the number of awards that it has received because of this great educator. He comes from a great family with a great wife who is also an educator. Today I rise to salute him as a first-ranked scholar, but a person of great eloquence and talent and oration, someone who was inspirational to the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King and the Honorable late Congresswoman Barbara Jordan, my predecessor. A prodigy himself, Dr. Freeman graduated from Virginia Union University at 18 and went on to become a professor at Virginia Union before his 30th birthday. He would later receive degrees from Andover Newton Theological School, Harvard University, Chicago Divinity, the University of Vienna in Austria, and the University of Liberia in Africa. Dr. Freeman was among a group of accomplished academies of color, academics of color, hired by Texas Southern University. What I want to say most about Dr. Freeman is that he is a Renaissance man. He's a man of courage. He's a man who broke color lines, teaching at Rice University for 23 years. And he is a man that has a number of sayings that are so vital. One is, there is an ethical dimension to leadership. If you do not consider ethics, then your leadership is hollow. I thank Dr. Freeman for being the kind of icon that America can honor. His leadership will be rewarded by the many students who have gone on to greatness because of his tutoring. And, in fact, even Denzel Washington was tutored by Dr. Thomas Freeman. He is 95 years old and will be honored in his retirement at Texas Southern University tomorrow, Friday, on September 13th, 2013. However, his light will continue to shine, for he will continue to work with students and to provide light to those who are willing to learn. Thank you, Dr. Freeman, for being a great American and a great leader and a man of ethics, passion, Christianity, and courage. I yield back.
The chair lays before the House the following personal requests.
Leave of absence requested for Mr. Nadler of New York for Wednesday, September 11th and Thursday, September 12th.
Without objection, the request is granted. Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 3rd, 2013, the gentleman from Iowa, Mr. King, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, it's my privilege to be recognized to address you here on the floor of the United States House of Representatives, and to do so the day after the anniversary of the tragic attacks on America that took place September 11, 2001, and the tragic attack that took place against Americans in Benghazi September 11, 2012. Who would have believed, Madam Speaker, that a full year would go by and we would still not have the truth, we'd still not be to the bottom of the Benghazi events. We still wouldn't have a timeline, we wouldn't have a chronology, we wouldn't have an autopsy report from Ambassador Stevens and others, we wouldn't have the testimony of those that were wounded, those that survived, and we wouldn't have the full story from the administration, and we wouldn't have yet the confession from the administration that they willfully, I believe, misinformed the American people and the United States Congress. And so the individual who has taken the lead on this Benghazi series of events and called for a special select committee to investigate is a gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Wolf, and I'd be very pleased to yield so much time as he may consume to the leader on the Benghazi incident here in the United States Congress, Mr. Wolf of Virginia.
And, Madam Speaker, yesterday marked the one-year anniversary of the deadly attacks on the U.S. consulate and CIA annex in Benghazi, Libya, which took the lives of 4 Americans and seriously wounded several others. One is still out at Walter Reed Hospital after 1 year. Despite a year of investigations in 5 different House committees, most of the key questions about what happened in Benghazi and why no response was authorized by Washington remain unanswered. So far, the Congress has failed. That is why, since last November, I've been pushing for a House Select Committee to focus on this investigation, hold public hearings, issue subpoenas to key witnesses and survivors, and produce a final report that answers these important questions. 174 Republicans in the House have now co-sponsored H.Res. 36 to establish the Select Committee. 3/4 of the majority and 6 new co-sponsors joined this week alone. The Select Committee approach has been endorsed by family members of the Benghazi victims, the Special Operations Community, the Federal Law Enforcement Association, and the editorial page of the Wall Street Journal, among many other prominent individuals and organizations. I was pleased, Madam Speaker, to receive a copy of a letter sent to the Speaker earlier this week calling for the creation of a select committee and signed by some of the most respected and distinguished national security and military leaders that have served our country. These leaders include former Attorney General Michael McCasey, who also served as the judge in the trial of the Blind Sheikh, the first trial dealing with an attack against the World Trade Center. Admiral James Ace Lyons, U.S. Navy retired, former Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. Pacific Fleet. General Frederick J. Croson, U.S. Army retired, former Vice Chief of Staff of the Army. Lieutenant General William Jerry Boykin, U.S. Army retired, former Deputy Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Commander in Mogadishu during the Black Hawk Down incident that all of us know about. Lieutenant General Harry Edward Soyster, U.S. Army retired, former Director of the Defense Intelligence Agency. Ambassador Henry Cooper, former Chief Negotiator of the Defense and Space Talks and the former Director, Strategic Defense Initiative. And Major General Paul A. Valley, U.S. Army retired, former Deputy Commander of the U.S. Army Forces Pacific. The Honorable Tidal McCoy, former Secretary of the Air Force. Lieutenant Colonel Allen West, U.S. Army and former Member of Congress. Honorable Joseph E. Schmitz, former Inspector General of the Department of Defense. Honorable Michelle Van Cleve, former National Counterintelligence Executive. Vice Admiral Robert Monroe, U.S. Navy, retired, former Director of the Defense Nuclear Agency. And Frank Gaffney, former Assistant Secretary of Defense for International Security Policy. It is good to have their support for this important effort, and I would like now to read the text of their letter. They said, "Dear Mr. Speaker, as former military, intelligence, and national security officials with extensive experience in security policy and practice, we are concerned about the American people's apparently serious loss of confidence in the institutions of their government. One factor contributing to this alienation has been the failure of those institutions to respond appropriately to the murderous jihadist attacks in Benghazi on September 11, 2012. They rightly expect, at an absolute minimum, that Congress will ensure accountability of those responsible. As you are well aware," they go on to say, "our country is nearing the first anniversary of the assault on the Special Mission Compound and CIA annex in Benghazi," and we all know that was yesterday. To date, however, the 5 House committees that share jurisdiction have held only a small number of mostly less than illuminating hearings into the policies that led to and the events that occurred during and after the murder of 4 of our countrymen and the wounding of many more. We appreciate that the chairman of these committees produced 4 months ago a joint interim report. Yet its authors acknowledge that they did not have the answers to many of the crucial national security questions. In addition, they go on to say no time frame has been publicly announced for going beyond the interim report or holding additional hearings toward that end. This is particularly troubling in light of press accounts that the survivors of the Benghazi attacks are being intimidated. Federal employees and survivors are being intimidated and risk job action should they come forward with their eyewitness account. If Congress does not afford them the opportunity to do so without fear of retaliation by issuing subpoenas for their testimony, it will be complicit in precluding their help in seeing that justice is served and in denying the American people the full accounting to which they are entitled. They go on to say, we believe an ample chance has been afforded for the regular order to operate in investigating Benghazi Gate. It has failed to do so. Now is the time for a select committee to be established with a mandate to draw upon the 5 committees' existing investigative resources and results to date, and to complete, if possible by year's end, the necessary, thorough, and comprehensive inquiry. This approach can alleviate concerns about undue cost and further delay in convening a select committee. Mr. Speaker, they go on to say, the survivors want to tell their stories and correct the record. 2 different books based on their stories are reportedly in the works. If the American people learn what happened from a published account rather than from those charged with congressional oversight, the perception of a cover-up or at least a serious dereliction of duty is inevitable. Our republic is predicated, they said, on the trust of the governed in those they choose to represent them. We must not allow the jihadists who have thus far paid no price for killing Ambassador Stevens, murdering 3 of his comrades, and afflicting the lives of so many others to do violence as well as other people's confidence in the constitutional form of government. For all these reasons, we call upon you to establish without further delay a select committee to investigate the Benghazi attacks. I think they make a very, very powerful case. For the Congress to fail to do this, as they said, the Congress will be complicit in this. So I call on the Speaker of the House to do what these gentlemen who have as much experience as any member who serves in this Congress on either side to do and establish a select committee. And with that, I thank the gentleman and yield back. I thank him for the time.
Thank you. I thank the gentleman from Virginia. And reclaiming my time, I'd ask if the gentleman could stick around for a moment. A couple of questions occurred to me as I'm listening to this presentation here, and I wanted to ask, for the record, your knowledge of the Benghazi incident goes more deep than mine does, and I think probably as deep as anyone in this and the Congress does, Mr. Wolf. And so I wanted to ask, do we know how many survivors there were from the Benghazi incident?
There were roughly 30 or 31 or so that waited on the tarmac after the fighting had ended to be picked up, and they were not picked up in an American plane. They were picked up in a Libyan plane. There were a number of wounded. One, Mr. Ubin, who is currently out at Walter Reed, and another gentleman who was severely wounded, and several others who were wounded. They were flown out separate from that other group, and they were flown out. Not in an American plane, but in a Libyan plane, maybe even commandeered by those that rescued. And also we know that we lost 4. Several were Navy SEALs, and we were also told by people who have been in touch with those on the ground that there was a call from the consulate to the annex saying, help us. They were told to stand down by the CIA station chief, not knowing if that came out of Washington or not. They did stand down. They got another call, and they were told to stand down again, and they did stand down. They had another call, and they finally said, we're not standing down, and they went. And some believe that had they gone on the initial time, they could have saved the life of Ambassador Stevens and Sean Smith.
And reclaiming my time, the information that you provided here, especially information as to the numbers of survivors, the numbers of wounded, where they were picked up and by a Libyan plane, not a U.S. plane, was that information that was forthcomingly delivered to you or to the American people by our administration, or how did you learn those facts?
No, it was not delivered by the administration, nor was it delivered by any committee up here. It was delivered by people who are connected to, related to people who were on the ground.
And do we know, has any of that information been entered into the record under oath as far as witnesses are concerned before any of the 5 committees that have jurisdiction?
I think not, but I have not been in some of the closed doors. As you know, that's one of the problems. The Intelligence Committee has everything in closed doors. Quite frankly, if you're a member of the House, you have very little opportunity to find out sometimes what even goes on the Intelligence Committee. And so they could have been sworn in. The people that I've spoken to have not even been called. And I spoke last Tuesday, to a person who was on the scene at the time of the attack, and he has not been called.
And pardon me, and Gabe what?
And he has not been called.
He's not been called. And so Mr. Wolf, is it possible that the Select Committee on Intel could have had testimony before the committee, and because they are bound by the confidentiality of classified information, that even if they learn something on an open source, that they also concurs with what they learned in a classified setting, they now are prohibited from speaking about that outside of that room?
I don't know. I do not serve on the Intelligence Committee. They're all good people on it, and Mr. Rogers does a good job. I can't answer. I think they could better answer that. I don't know what the rules are with regard to that.
Let me just pick up on that then, and that is that I have a measure of classified rating as a member of the Judiciary Committee. That's the rules we're bound by when we go into the classified setting. What we speak about there, what we learn there, even if we know it from an open source before we go in, or even if we learn it from an open source and after we go out, we cannot speak to that topic outside of the room. So that's one of the reasons why we need the Select Committee. Even if all of the information we need to know happens to be gathered by the Special Select Committee on Intelligence, that doesn't get that information that can be declassified. It doesn't get it correlated with the balance of the information that is public knowledge or the information that's come before the other committees. Another question, do we have any autopsy reports from Ambassador Stevens or any of the other three fatalities that were killed in that action a year and a day ago?
My committee that I chair, the House Appropriations Subcommittee that funds the Justice Department and the FBI, we have never received an autopsy report. We have been told how the death of the ambassador took place verbally, but we have never seen the autopsy report.
And do we have a timeline that sets down the events that took place from its inception to its relative kinetic conclusion and the operations in the cleanup that also correlates with a timeline of the Situation Room in the White House and who was in the White House and what they knew and when they knew it? Are you aware of any timeline that correlates that?
There may be. Perhaps the Intel Committee has it. I understand there are some timelines out there that do not quite match.
Yes.
But I do not know the answer to that.
That's
why we
my
need public hearings.
And I thank the gentleman from Virginia. That's my understanding as well. And this colloquy that we've had here, I think, illuminates the questions, some of the questions that can be answered with a special select committee that would be addressing the Benghazi incident. And a full year and a day has gone by. The trail gets more cold every day, and just yesterday I saw the announcement that the administration is going to make some of the survivors available to Congress, finally, after a full year, so that we can have some dialogue with them. I just envision the 9/11 Commission that sat around a table, they swore in witnesses, they built a public record, the American people watched in on all of those deliberations so they could draw their judgment on whose version was the most accurate and the closest to the truth. When the 9/11 Commission report came out, it was a bound book about that thick. I read it, a lot of us read it, but that was the definitive response of the United States Congress that said, these are the facts as we can determine them. The reasoned judgment of the United States Congress. That also happened on the Warren Commission report and the assassination of President Kennedy. I think that the Benghazi incident deserves a full investigation in that fashion. I applaud the gentleman from Virginia for taking the lead on this, and I'll certainly support it all the way to its conclusion.
I thank the gentleman. Thank you for the time.
Thank the gentleman from Virginia and reclaiming my time. I appreciate having the dialogue to this extent, and I know that the gentleman from Pennsylvania has a real focus on Benghazi, and we've had some of this dialogue before, and so I'd be very pleased to yield so much time as he may consume to the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Perry.
Well, thank you, sir, for yielding the time, and I want to begin by thanking our colleague from Virginia, Mr. Wolf, and for his leadership with House Resolution 36. It should not have to come to a select and special committee to investigate this, but it's very apparent that the administration operating on point on this is doing everything they can and expending all resources to obfuscate, stonewall, and keep the truth and the facts from the American people. And so while we appreciate the fact that there are numerous committees in the House investigating this simultaneously but individually, one concerted effort is probably what's going to take at the end of the day to answer the call of this administration, who would rather this information not be let out to the American people. I just want to start out by saying that, you know, a year ago on this day, Americans were waking up to or hearing about on their lunch hour that the first ambassador in over 30 years, a United States ambassador, had been killed on foreign shores. And as a person who's operated in the military and as just a citizen who thinks that, look, some of this would make common sense on the anniversary date of such a historic event and shameful event in America, that we would increase our security posture, especially overseas. And as a person who has served overseas during 9/11, the anniversary of 9/11, I know very well that we did increase our security posture. So the fact that this happened really leads question to what the heck was going on at the State Department regarding the security in Benghazi and who was making decisions. It's disgraceful that an entire year later, despite the fact that a number of the terrorists have been identified who have participated in this attack, not one of them has been brought to justice, not one. And it's also interesting that this administration has the information, the intelligence information that it has regarding Syria, yet while we were in Benghazi, while we had boots on the ground in Libya, a year later we don't seem to have the facts about the intelligence that occurred there. Some questions that I have. It's on my understanding that Undersecretary Kennedy will be testifying in front of the Foreign Affairs Committee, under which I serve, next week, and we have some questions for him. I think the American people want to know why this administration politicized national security during an election cycle regarding the talking points. And who made that order? Who decided that? Who's at the top of that? The reduction in security forces, again on 9/11. It's my understanding with an outpost like Benghazi that it could only have come from one person. There's only one person in the State Department that is authorized to issue that reduction in security posture, and that is the Secretary. We want to know whose signature is on the authorization. We want to know who authorized not sending help. We don't know, we don't, in the military, we don't have a stand-down order. But somebody said no, and somebody didn't contingency plan. Somebody wasn't prepared. Now, the boots on the ground, the fine soldiers, the airmen, the men and women who would have gone in to help, they were ready to go. The United States military was ready to respond. It's the chain of command that wasn't somewhere along the line. And we want to know who made that decision. We don't know yet what the ambassador was doing there. Do we really know? We've asked the question, but we don't know what his purpose was. Sure, we hear that he was there to solidify that location as an operations point for diplomatic actions and show that everything was normal in Libya again. But on 9/11, you're really going to send him there with a reduced security posture? Folks, ladies and gentlemen, these ambassadors don't roll in a car by themselves out to these outposts. They don't even go to their consulates by themselves. They have a security detachment of highly trained people. The vehicles they ride in are not something that you buy on the lot. These guys are loaded up and they're ready to handle contingencies. This is abnormal. What was he doing there? Why does this administration continue to stonewall? You're hearing that they're giving us everything that we asked for, the emails and so on and so forth. Why is it that the emails come in a box to a SCIF, a secure location? Our people in the Congress, we're allowed to look at them. Our investigators are allowed to look at them, transcribe information, and then the emails go back into the box under armed guard and are taken away. We're not allowed to copy them. We're not allowed to get them all at one time. They're meted out to us. Why is that? If there's nothing to hide, why not have the information so we can all know what it is within the confines of security postures and operational security and security clearances? Finally, or maybe not finally, who's accountable? Has anybody been held accountable? Sure, there were some 4 employees at the State Department that were excused from their duty for a year, or nearly a year, with pay, and then brought back in. And this is not to disparage those employees. It's my understanding, since we haven't talked to any of them yet because we've been unallowed to talk to them or disallowed to talk to them, that they didn't even know they were held responsible until the day it happened, and they still haven't seen the report that says they were responsible for the reduced security posture. Nobody's been held accountable. Why wasn't the Secretary involved in the questioning of the ARB, the Accountability Review Board? The person at the top, not even questioned. That's like having a murder investigation in a family where the husband was having an affair and having strained relations with his wife. The wife was murdered, and he was the only one in town at the time, and not questioning that. That's what that's like. Nobody questions the secretary. Really? Was there real-time video information via drone, unarmed aerial vehicle? We heard originally, I was in the questioning in the hearing with the Secretary Clinton, when she originally came earlier this spring, and she said that there was no real-time information, yet on national radio, I heard a guy call into national radio who was the payload operator, and to be clear, the payload operator is not the individual flying the unarmed aerial vehicle. The payload operator is the individual that handles the camera or the weapon system. So the individual handling the camera called into a national talk show and described what he was seeing as it was occurring. So if we had the real-time information, why weren't we acting on it? Where is that real-time information? Why haven't we seen it? Finally, where was the President during this? I mean, this is a crisis of national proportion and national security. And I know the President hasn't come before Congress to ask the question, and every time we ask anybody else the question, the answer is going to be, well, I don't know. I don't keep the President's schedule. Why can't the American people know the facts? We just want the truth. We just want the facts. The facts will lead us to the truth. We're not on a witch hunt. The American people deserve to know. The families of the fallen, they deserve to know what happened here. And I know the administration is hoping that time will go by. Debt ceiling, continuing resolution, Obamacare, Syria, anything will get in the way of finding out what happened here. But we are duty-bound. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, we are duty-bound to find out this information on behalf of the American people. I applaud you, Mr. King. Thank you for yielding the time, and I yield back.
And I thank the gentleman from Pennsylvania and appreciate his